everybody, Mike Iaconelli. Welcome to a brand new In the Shop, and we got a good video for you today. And in today's shop video, we're going to go over my top 5 baits for early wintertime fishing. Top 5 baits for early winter. We have to start out by talking a little bit about what early winter means. Depending on where you're at in the country, that water temperature is going to be different. But without a doubt, early winter is the time when you're really starting to see the coldest air temperatures and the coldest water temperatures of the year, right? So think about it in those terms, right? Fall has left us, right? The leaves have changed. You know, the transitional weather from summer to cold is done, and we're really starting to settle into winter, right? So the coldest air temperature of the year, the coldest water temperature of the year, no matter where you live, Northeast, Midwest, South, West Coast, doesn't matter. When you enter that period, you've entered the early winter pattern, okay? Also, I want you just to remember that these fish have fed a couple months ago, right? You know, September, October, November. Those fish have fed up. Now they've migrated to where they're going to spend their winter. So this early winter pattern, you've got fish that are still eating because they have to, but they were gorging a couple months ago. You also have fish that are just starting to show up, right? Because this is early winter. This is the first part of this 2-month, 3-month period of cold water. So you have fish that have just showed up. You have a few more that are just getting here, right? So there's still a little bit of transition going on. But in general, early winter, guys, coldest air of the year, coldest water of the year, you're starting to see that for the first time. All right, I want to go over really, when I think about this early winter pattern, the first half of the winter, my top 5 baits. And I really have these broken down into 3 that are more power fishing techniques and 2 that are more finesse techniques. And I always want to fish like that, especially in the winter. I always want to have some power fishing tools, some finesse fishing tools. And the reason for that is in the winter, they're really stacked up, right? I'm trying to explain this. The 2 times of the year when you're going to see these fish stacked up, pre-spawn and winter. The 2 times when they're the tightest they'll ever be, right? So because of that, having a few power fishing lures and a few finesse fishing lures will maximize those places, right? In the winter, I'm fishing these more defined drop-offs. If you're watching this, I invite you to click on our entire video about winter fishing. You'll see that these fish really want to get on these deeper, more vertical break banks. And a lot of times we're not talking about areas that are 1 mile or 2 miles long. These are small places. These are areas that are 40, 50 feet long, maybe to an area the size of a football field. These are smaller areas and they're on these more vertical breaks. And because of that, having some power fishing lures and some finesse will maximize those spots, okay? So top 5 early wintertime baits, here they go. Number 1, I have to start with this one because it is an early winter killer, and it is a tight wobble crankbait or a tight wobble plug. Okay? You know, the wobble on this is so important because you really, in this early winter phase, remember, coldest water of the year, guys, you're going to see temperatures anywhere from the mid-30s, upper 30s, all the way to the mid-50s, even if you're down south. That's cold water for those bass where you live. And because of that, we really want to take everything and make it slower, tighter, more quiet. We're trying to mimic the forage with our lures. So this tight wobble crankbait is a killer in early winter. One of the ways you could could tell, and if you look at a crankbait, a lot of times you could look at it and have a feeling it's a tighter wobble crankbait. By the way, this is a big fan of the Frittside. This is the Frittside. I love the Frittside 5. I love the 5 Biggin, and there's also a 5 Junior. I love the Fritsides. But you can look at a plug and sort of tell whether it's going to be a tight wobble. One of the indications is that the bill doesn't have a severe angle, right? So look at the bill on that plug. It's just a little down from the nose, but it's almost in line with the nose of the bait, right? So, you know, not a bill that's like this, but a bill that's more in line. That's going to be very indicative of a tighter wobble. The other thing you're going to see is, if you look at the body shape, most or many of these tighter wobble crankbaits are going to have a flatter side to them, okay? And this one does. But the other thing about this Frittside I want to mention real quick is that it has these, they call them flash discs. And basically what they are is they're weights built into the belly of this crankbait. So when I'm reeling it, remember, early winter, guys, the water's cold. When I'm reeling it, I'm not burning it. I'm just slowly wobbling it down there, reeling it. And when I hit something, I stop. And that's almost like a suspending crankbait. So when that Frittside hits something and stops, boom. It just sometimes sits there, barely floats up a little bit. Everything's slowed down, right? I'm mimicking the natural forage. The bass is lethargic themselves. So everything's slowed down. The last thing about the Frittside, if I was to shake this and had rattles, you would hear it. Trust me. Ready? No rattles. So there's actually a rattling, clacking version of the Frittside and a non-rattling. Early winter time, I want my crankbaits to be silent. I don't want a lot of noise, even in dirty water. I want everything to be subtle and muted. But this crankbait in early winter got my #1 choice because remember what I said. Early winter, some fish are still sort of coming. There's still some transient fish that are getting into those deep vertical break areas, the deepest part of that lake you're fishing that has those 45-degree angle banks. There's still fish coming. The nice thing about the crankbait is I can cover a lot of water in those deeper areas until I find where that load of fish are located, right? And there are going to be more than one there. When you catch them this time of year, there's going to be more than one. Last thing on color, guys, match the hatch. Try to think about the forage you're fishing in the wintertime. I really like those shad patterns. I like the crawdad patterns. And then if you've got a bluegill or sunfish around, I really like those chartreuse pattern crankbaits, okay? So #1 early winter bait for me is a tight wobble crankbait. All right, let's go to 2. And this one falls in line with the crankbait in many respects, but it has a big key difference. And #2 for me in this early winter period is a jerkbait, okay? A jerkbait. And, you know, really I want to make sure that you know that I love to fish 2 different kinds of jerkbaits in the early winter. One that I would call a standard lip jerkbait, and if you look at it, just has a regular lip, it's probably 1/2 inch long, standard lip, and then your +1 and +2 deep lip jerkbaits, okay? So this is a Berkley Stunna. This is the regular 112, the +1 and the +2 that have that bill that's a lot longer, probably 1 inch long. And this is going to be a great bait from, you know, 2-3 feet all the way out to 12 or 15 feet. So, you know, 0 to 8 feet, a regular lip stunner is fine. As I get deeper than 8, I go to the +1 and +2 style baits. But like a crankbait, this bait has a subtle movement in the water, right? And I can make little twitches with a Stunna. It's a suspending jerkbait. I can make little twitches, and this bait's not going to go far, right? It's going to dart, toom, toom, and then sit. Dart, toom, toom, and then sit. And if you think about the forage that they're eating in the early winter, they're eating crawfish, they're eating bluegills, and they're eating shad. They're eating, you know, minnows, shiners, herring, and that bait fish is slowed down. Many times it's dying. That water temperature gets too cold. Shad and threadfin and gizzards and alewife, they're fragile. That water temperature hits the 30s or 40s up north. Dude, that bait starts to die. Or if it's not dying, that bait almost gets motionless, just sitting. You can do that with the suspending jerkbait, right? So, you know, you can almost imagine that you're fishing these deeper, more vertical break areas of the lake. And, you know, those fish are set up on that break, right? They have easy access to go up and down. And I could twitch that there and just kill it. And that bait sitting motionless or maybe slightly sinking or slightly rising is such a real imitation of their forage. They have to eat it, okay? The one thing I would tell you in early winter is slow down those twitches. Too many times when we're fishing a suspending jerkbait, you know, we get all excited and and dude, in the you know, pre-spawn, post-spawn, summer, early fall, that water temperature is warm, hit that jerkbait. But in the early winter, this water's getting as cold as it's going to get. Slow down and make your twitches small. You'd be surprised how far this thing will go, even with little twitches. So just the littlest, you'll get a nice side-to-side kick, okay? The other thing with this early winter pattern is the colder the water, the longer the pause. So in this time of the year, I'm letting these suspending jerkbaits sit a long time. And when I find that right cadence, I try to remember, right? So I'm fishing the stunner, and I'm going down the bank, and maybe for the first 10 casts, I give it, you know, 2 twitches and a 5-second pause. I do that for 10 or 20 casts. The next 10 or 20 casts, 3 little twitches and a 10-second pause. And I'm constantly changing my cadence to figure out what they want. Once I figure out what they want, boom, every cast becomes that cadence. Generally in the winter, early winter, colder water, slower pauses, longer pauses, okay? Number 2, suspending jerkbait, without a doubt. All right, number 3, and this is the last of my power fishing lures for early winter, is metal. And if you're a fan of this channel, I really invite you to go back and watch some of the videos we have specifically talking about some of these different metal baits. But I love metal in the winter. But in the early winter, I prefer a tail spinner over a spoon, regular slab spoon. I prefer the tail spinner over the blade bait, right? I like it in the category of metal. I like the tail spinner in the early winter the best. And dude, when you look at that thing, it's honestly one of the easiest, simplest lures ever. Like, you look at the design of it, it's just easy. And it is just a metal body. By the way, this is a Molix Trago spin tail. There's a lot of these on the market. If you're an old guy like me, you remember the Man's Little George started a lot of this, but real easy lure. It's basically just a body. This one has a nice, really natural fish-shaped body, and it's got a very flat nose, and you're going to see why in a second. But on the tail of it, it's got a spinner. They come in a Colorado, Indiana, willow blade tails. The Molix Trago vibe, the swivel, that bearing swivel is actually built into the body, which is really cool. And then it has basically usually just one treble on the body, on the bottom. But this is a metal bait that in the early winter, I can fish it and have control of it down that slope. You keep hearing me talk about this slope. Early winter time, I'm fishing the deeper, more vertically, you know, accessed areas of that lake. Dams, riprap, causeways, bluffs, channel swings, channel bends, main lake points. And a lot of times that bank goes like this. It's got a hill to it. And I'm able to keep that tail spinner moving down that hill. And the best way I can describe what this bait does is that on the fall, remember I said that flat front? On the fall, this thing's going to shake a little and that tail is going to helicopter down. And that really, to me, in this early wintertime pattern is looking like a dying bait fish. It's looking like a piece of forage that's injured, or, you know, it's just down near the bottom and something's wrong with it. And dude, they are a sucker for an easy meal in the early wintertime pattern. So you have a little bit of vibration with that chin of that bait. You have this tail helicoptering. And then, you know, really my number one technique in the early winter with that tail spin is just to maintain bottom contact, but with little lifts and pauses. So little yo-yos, right? Boom, boom, boom. And as it's coming, it's going down that slope. Even on the lift, you're going to get a movement where that spinner's going to move up on the lift, and then on the fall, shake and spin down, okay? Tremendous for covering a lot of water, tremendous for staying closer to the bottom. Generally, in this early wintertime period, you're going to see fish that are mid to lower water column. There's not a better one in the early winter than a tail spinner for those low fish, okay? All right, let's get on to my last two of my top 5 early wintertime baits. And now I'm going to get into finesse, guys. And I got to tell you that this is, for me, has become, in the last 5, 6, 7 years, one of my killer, if not the best, the second best early winter bait for me. It's replaced the shaky head. It's replaced the drop shot for this early winter period. And it is a Ned rig. A Ned rig. And guys, I keep it so simple with this Ned rig. I want to show you how I rig it real quick and show you how I fish it. And it's so easy, especially if you've fished in the early winter, the crankbait, the jerkbait, or tail spinner, and you found them. You know that little 30-yard stretch of channel swing where they're living. Now you come clean up, okay? So simple mushroom head, 1/16 ounce, all the way up to a quarter, depending on your depth, depending on your wind, but an 1/8 is my number one size, okay? An 1/8 ounce is my number one size. If it gets real deep and windy, a 3/16 for sure. If you've got current, maybe a 3/16, but the 1/8 I love. And the mushroom head, by the way, this is a Berkley Fusion. They call it a half head. But if you look at it, it's just a little gopher head. It's got a little gopher style head on it. The number one thing for your Ned head is make sure the line tie is 90 degrees. It is. And then your Ned bait. Basically, any do-nothing little fat piece of plastic will work. A soft stick bait, 4-inch, a big soft stick bait, bit and a half. As long as it has hardly no action. I love this stuff. This is the Max Scent. This is the Lil General. It's just basically just the stubby Lil General. I like it because it's got scent to it. It's awesome. But guys, all I'm going to do is just thread that thing on there. Just so easy. The nice thing about this bait is that it's got a relatively small hook. So even in cover, I can drag that thing around there. Okay, so thread it on. And then the only other thing I do to my Ned rig, and really this is almost all the time that I fish it, is I'm just going to add a little rattle to the tail. And you can get these at Tackle Warehouse. It's an 8mm. They come in glass or plastic. And the plastic ones are nice because it helps that tail float a little bit. But I just wet it and I just put it in the back of that Ned. So I'll show you what it looks like. Oh, I'll show you what it looks like going halfway in, and then I'll stop, okay? So that's kind of what it looks like going into the back of that Ned bait. And then I just want to make sure that's nice and straight. And I get it in there, okay? So nice thing about that is now I have a little sound as I'm dragging it down there. And if you use that plastic rattle, the plastic and the air inside that rattle chamber are actually a little buoyant. So you're going to get a little more tail lift on that, okay? But really all I'm doing, guys, is I'm dragging it. You heard me talk about it on all those 3 power fishing lures. But the forage is slow. The forage is moving slower. The forage is dying. And that includes the other forage, right? Crawfish, bugs, gobies, darters, little catfish. You know, the little stuff that's on the bottom, they're moving slow too. So I'm making bottom contact. I'm dragging it extremely slow. Dude, I'm doing nothing with my rod tip except dragging. The minute I feel it hit something, I stop. When I stop, I let it sit in place. Might give it a couple little tit-tit-tit, and you'll hear that rattle. Tit-tit-tit. If I don't get bit, I start dragging again real slow. So this is a great bait in the early winter because it mimics natural forage and it's staying on the bottom, right? For those lethargic fish. They're either going to be suspended or they're going to be down at the bottom, and a lot of them are, okay? Number 4, Ned rig, early wintertime fishing, okay? And then finally, guys, number 5, and this is another finesse bait. If I didn't mention this one, there's something wrong with me, because it has been, and now with the advent of forward-facing sonar, it 100% is a killer in early winter. Now this one, guys, I want to tell you that this one is especially effective when you see fish off the bottom, right? You know, fish are down toward the bottom. You know, that thing, the Ned rig, great. The crankbait, you're deflecting off the bottom, it's great. But in the early winter, on those 45-degree banks, sometimes the fish will get off the bottom and suspend on that break, okay? The deepest, most vertical break areas of that part of the lake you're fishing, you look out there with forward facing, you see the food, you see the fish, and you see them off of that break, just suspend it. Guys, nothing in the early winter could catch those fish better. Suspending jerkbait's probably a close second. We already talked about that one. But nothing will catch them better than my number 5 early winter choice, which is a jig head and bait. And I want to flush this out with you. Jig head and bait. And I got 2 choices for this, okay? Let's talk about the jig head just real quick. Guys, number 1 feature, this is that brand new Berkley Fusion, a minnow head that they have. But the number 1 consideration, guys, is that 90-degree line tie. As long as the line tie's up and down, I'm good with it, okay? There's a look at that one, by the way. I love these heads anywhere from an 1/8 to a 1/4. But the 1/8 and the 3/16 are my number 1 sizes, okay? This is the hybrid jig head. That's the actual name of this thing. Again, 90-degree line tie. And then I'm going to put one of these 2 baits on depending on the mood of the fish, okay? If I get an early wintertime day and the fishing's brutally tough, I'm talking, guys, I'm talking bluebird conditions, you know, a post front conditions, fish that are just lethargic, there's no wind, these are tough fish. I'm going to thread a minnow style lure on that jig head. Guys, you've heard, you can't get away from it right now. Jig head minnow, you know, is the biggest rage in fishing, but just thread a minnow on that hook. I love the Max Scent minnow. I love this one. This is the drip minnow. Comes in a lot of different sizes. But I want a minnow that has a tail that has a non-action tail on that jig head. So the nice thing about the drip minnow, it's got like just a little bulbous tail. And when I see those fish, I'll actually thread it on here for you just to kind of give you an idea what it looks like. And I just want to make sure that bait stays nice and straight, you know. That head's got a lot of keepers on it, which is super nice, but I want that bait nice and straight. And really what I'm going to do with that minnow, straight tail, non-action minnow when the fishing's tough, is I'm going to cast it to the fish I see, and I'm going to shake and reel very slowly. So this is what I'm going to do. This is an example I always give because that's what it's like. You got to pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time. It's a hard thing to do, but I want to throw that minnow out and I want to get it to the level of the fish and I want to shake and reel real slowly at the same time, okay? So super lethargic, tough fishing, early wintertime fishing for these suspended bass. Shake and reel as slow as you can. One last thing on this. Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, I want to keep this bait at the level of the fish or above the fish. When they're suspended, guys, I don't want to get this bait lower than the fish. I don't want to make them have to chase it down. This is early winter. They don't want to expend a lot of energy. And if they're suspended, they're more likely to feed up than down. So as you're shaking and reeling real slow, at the level of the fish or slightly above the fish, okay? All right, last but not least, this number 5, you heard me call it a jig head. And there's another bait, and that is a finesse boot tail swim bait. So the opposite is true with this one. When the fishing's tough, when it's cold and the fish aren't lethargic, you know, they're not biting, it's high pressure, it's cold front, the minnow. But on those early winter days when you get a little window of opportunity, and that could be a front coming, clouds, wind that rolled in. You know, you get a day where for some reason the sun's shining and they're biting. Just switch to a little finesse swim bait instead of that straight tail minnow. I like the 2.8 and the 3.3 boot style swim baits. A lot of good ones out there. This one's the Berkley Power Swimmer. And same thing, I'm just going to thread that on there, boot down. I want that tail facing down for maximum action. And that one has action on its own. So you know, you can imagine this thing is more of the rolling action. You know, you're reeling and shaking your rod tip at the same time. And that's causing this bait to roll. It's a more subtle movement. But that boot tail, that tail's going to wag all on its own. So the same theory, guys, I try to put it at the level of the fish, right? Or a little above the fish that I'm seeing out there, or the bait, trying to keep it in the bait. Just a nice, slow, steady reel. And that boot tail going like that on days where they're more active is a better trigger than the minnow, okay? So number 5 in my list of wintertime, early wintertime baits, jig head has to be on one of your rods. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. We really tried to dial into this early wintertime bite and went over my top 5 baits for this period. We're for sure, keep following this one because we're going to do, you know, a mid to late winter selection as well. The baits are going to change a little. The water's still cold, but the bite and the baits are going to change. So keep your eye out for that video dropping real soon. But I hope you like this one. Top 5 baits for early winter. Water's cold, the air's cold, but you can still catch a lot of fish. Guys, do me a favor real quick. Hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to the channel. When you do that, we're going to send you a notification about a new piece of content dropping every single week. If you're already subscribed, tell your friends about Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. We're here to help you hopefully become a better angler or learn a couple things. So try one of those 5. You're going to get bit in the early winter. Bye. Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli out in the shop. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, you have to check out that one, and I hope you like them.